Hi, this is Liam Conroy, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on the Topeka 501 School District and its level of student engagement. So student engagement is a piece of what we look at as relevance as part of the 5 R's when we're analyzing what we want to do as a school district in general. Relevance is defined as the power and ability of specific information to meet the needs of its user, strengthens learner motivation, and allows learning to become more engaging, empowering, connected, applicable to the real world, and is socially significant. It has 4 components: curriculum, instruction, and technology, but we'll be focusing on student engagement in particular. Student engagement criteria include several different pieces that are looked at to make sure that a school is implementing these properly. Student input, which is cooperation between students and the district educators in what relates to the students. An individualized plan of study advisory council, basically a council that's designed to establish custom plans of study as well as connections to business or post-secondary connections for students. Individualized plans of study, to where students have plans of study that are based on their interests and which in turn affect school courses and extracurricular activities. The relation between teacher to student, the inherent knowledge of the students could influence the lesson plans of teachers. Student to student, assignments in class can be tackled by groups of students to aid in collaborative learning and help enhance social skills. And student to teacher relationships, that students have their own input on their learning and should feel free to communicate to their instructors to get the best education they can for their future. Now, for my part analyzing this, I'm relatively new to the Topeka 501 School District. I came out of a profession in zookeeping, so teaching in of itself is very new to me, as it is for many other students in this class. And the school that I teach at, Hope Street Charter Academy, has a very specific student population, mostly for kids who are either truant or may have behavioral issues that make a large classroom setting not as applicable to them for their studies. But in spite of that, I'm trying to analyze the district as a whole based on my limited experiences within the district and what we've discussed as far as district guidelines in our school. With regard to student input, I feel that students have some amount of autonomy in 501 schools, and that students with instructor assistance can change things in dramatic levels when approved. We had students at Hope Street who were able to make 2 large changes through our environmental science class, one of which was to implement a wind turbine, which actually some government legislation had to be altered in order for them to be able to do that. And then the second piece of feedback was just with regard to our lunch trays and what material they were made out of to try and make a more environmentally conscious decision toward that. So again, with permission from higher bodies, our students were able to enact those forms of change. Students have limitations on what times they can create activities for, especially based on instructor schedules. As much as students may want to participate in something outside of school, they still need an instructor to be able to be a sponsor for it, because obviously we don't want to have kids that are completely unattended. In my personal experience, I feel that students would prefer to alter their time spent in school than to spend time at school outside of normal hours. I can't even get students to come to me during my normal times that I'm available outside of class time, before or after school. In some of these cases, it's because we have a lot of students who actively work and therefore aren't able to work into their schedule extra time spent at school. So, a possible solution to this would be, is there the potential for courses that meet both needs? When I think of some of the groups at our school in particular, we have ones that are related to the LGBTQ community and to empowerment of women. If we had classes that were more related to these in the social studies field, perhaps it could fulfill needs of both of these while still expanding out to students that may not have otherwise taken part in an extracurricular activity relating to it. As far as an individualized plan of study advisory council, Topeka 501 has the District Citizens Advisory Council. It's composed of parents, teachers, administrators, and community members. Some of the subjects that they have tackled in the past few years have been human sexuality, secondary electives, physical activity, K-12 college and careers, and fundraising, all as they relate to the school body in of itself. The District Citizens Advisory Council takes into account what members state and what other organizations state. In other words, for example, for the physical activity portion, they looked at recommendations from health organizations to try and determine how much physical activity should be regulated in schools. So knowing now that we have a large input from parents, teachers, administrators, and community members, The question is how much input truly comes from students. Students are kind of an extension of each of these parts of this body, but are students actually taking part in the council at all? Do they have actual input on these decisions that are being made? And what percentage of parents participate? If the students aren't their own voice, I feel that the parents are the next best portion of that becomes kind of their voice and helps keep some of the school ideas grounded, no matter how much they are focused on the school itself. So it's another question of what percentage of parents participate. As will come up later in my discussion, my personal experience with parent-teacher conferences is that parent participation is relatively low. So by that same extension, it could be said that the same thing may be true of their participation in this advisory council. With regard to individualized plans of study, students have opportunities not only to do inventories of what jobs they may best be suited for in the future, in our case through a program called Career Cruising, but they're also able to participate in activities that attempt to promote plans for the future, including job selection, based on businesses that represent themselves. We have essentially what's close to like a job fair, but they also have to take that job that they select for their particular future goals and endeavors, and then apply it to other parts of their lives, such as being able to pay the electric bill or to be able to buy a car. Some amount of staff hiring and course selection is being provided based on student feedback. I myself am an example of that. I was hired on to Hope Street Academy because there was more of a desire for students to participate in zoology classes, and so here I am as a former zookeeper teaching zoology classes now. The best example of this is probably the Topeka Center for Advanced Learning and Careers, also abbreviated as TCALC. There, students can pursue classes that are related to subjects like green energy, teaching, medicine and health, design and construction, web and digital communication, engineering, baking, sports medicine, emergency response, law and public safety, computer science, and interactive media, all with the intent of entering those fields later in terms of a job. What I've noticed whenever I participate with other teachers from TCALC is it's hard to pin down how confident we all are as professionals that have been turned into teachers. Obviously, I've been put into this program as part of the transition to teaching, and the TCALC instructors are facing something similar. Is it just something that we're going to have to take time to get it fully under our feet? Or as people that are coming from a professional field completely transitioning over into teaching, is it something that can be sometimes insurmountable depending on the subject matter? When we're looking at the relationship from teacher to student in terms of relevance and student engagement, student progress is tracked and accounted for in lesson planning, as well as individual considerations like IEPs. These are frequently referenced for us at Hope Street because many of our students come here due to an IEP that's tougher to manage in a larger school setting. Collaborative efforts between teaching staff help ensure that different teaching strategies are suggested and cross-curricular needs are met. In particular, we put a lot of emphasis on English and math skills, regardless of what subject we teach. Training is also done to ensure equity as part of an instructor's lesson planning and classroom management. We don't want any students being left out because of their identifying culture or any other characteristics about themselves that could otherwise make it difficult for them to have a healthy learning environment. Even though the students are accounted for on a lot of different levels, their contemporary interests may not be fully taken into account. Obviously, even though teachers stay at an institution over a long period of time, student interests tend to wax and wane, and it's hard for us to get a true pulse on students in general unless we have children of our own in that similar age range or interact with a lot of students on that personal age range as well, with them having a lot of trust to let us into their lives. How many teachers are as technology savvy as their students also is a consideration. What technology is utilized in the classroom? This would partially be covered in another component of relevance, which is its self-labeled technology, but it's very applicable to how students interact with their lives. All teachers know that students spend a lot of time on their phone, and we know that they use a lot of programs, but the time spent on those programs in the class is usually not a huge crossover. If we could do more to incorporate these types of programs that they're already very invested in, we could probably get more student engagement numbers up. When we're looking at student-to-student interactions, there are plenty of collaborative learning opportunities that are provided for students. Instructors are also given training in approaches such as Kagan to enable peer-and-peer learning to where students are in charge of one another or able to provide one another with feedback to try and reach a conclusion. How often do students come to the conclusions independently without instructor guidance, however? Do we tend to try and lead the students toward the answer? Obviously we will as teachers, but how often are students able to come to that conclusion on their own? How much of it is one student telling the others and having other students copy off of it versus a student independently coming to a conclusion through the help of their peers? Another consideration is how often does the work ethic of some students drive down the motivations of others to work together in a group? And what is the future impact of this mismatch? Often we can get students who are good students, quote unquote, to be discouraged by students who have a lower effort in terms of participation. Therefore, they don't like to be forced into groups with them, and they would prefer to work alone rather than work with others. What do the implications of this have as far as being able to work with other people in the future, regardless of their work ethic, in an environment where you may have to deal with people with varying jobs and therefore what seems on the surface as a varied level of input? Between student-to-teacher relations, teachers give students feedback during the semester with emphasis given on administrators to keep up on grading to give students an up-to-the-minute impression of their progress. Teachers can also readily alter assignments done through the Google Suite and provide highlighted comment feedback. Parent-teacher conferences are also established by the district with students also invited. However, I personally feel that parent and student involvement in these activities is pretty limited. How many students actively choose to manage their own studies or show concern for them? Most of them are mostly invested in just passing and graduating without too much worry in the moment of being able to really apply their lessons or to actually put commitment into learning. How readily is feedback given in relationship to the class size? I'm blessed with small class sizes at Hope Street Academy of at a max about 15 students, but I could see how in a class of 30 students a lot more feedback can be lost in the shuffle, and that students that are on the medium end of the scale, not highly achieving, not highly underachieving, are going to be completely ignored altogether. Do teachers have sufficient time to keep up with grades? We have administrators breathing down our necks to try and get grades in, but should assignments be formatted differently so that instructors are able to get grades more readily updated quicker? Finally, here are the references that I used for this presentation. Thank you for your time.